I'm afraid to sleep for the third day. I close my eyes, and immediately his image appears. And it's so scary. I don't know what to do. Now, I'll share this terrible story with you. Maybe you can give me some kind of advice. Luna. That's what my dad called me. He loved to observe the full moon through a telescope and always told me all kinds of stories associated with this natural phenomenon. My dad also loves hiking in the woods, and when I was 14, my parents and I took tents, sleeping bags, rubber boots with us, and headed for a hike in the mountains for a few days. We hiked all day. The nature was unbelievable. High mountains followed by dense forest, loud birds that accompanied us all the time, and aching legs that made my mother and me feel wobbly in the evening. We decided to take a break. It was getting dark. The moon rolled out into the sky. A full moon! I grinned as I saw a big bright plate in the sky. We threw off our heavy backpacks and collapsed on the ground. An owl greeted us somewhere in the distance. And Dad hummed strangely, twisting a map in his hands. As it turns out, he couldn't figure out where we were. According to his calculations, this big clearing couldn't be on our route, but Mom and I didn't care. We wanted to relax. After setting up the tent, we immediately crawled into sleeping bags, and soon my parents fell asleep peacefully. But I couldn't sleep. There were too many experiences for one day. I climbed out of the tent and decided to wander around with a flashlight. When I got a few yards away from the tent, I heard a strange sound, like a splash of water. But Dad didn't say anything about water. I pointed the flashlight into the distance, but the darkness was all around me. Suddenly, I heard like it was a fish plunging into the water. I stopped. Suddenly, I heard muttering, very quiet, and it was hard to make out what it sounded like, but I felt like the sound was enveloping me. I turned my head, and the sound haunted me. Panic won out, and I ran toward the tent. I crouched in the corner, dove into my sleeping bag, and closed my eyes. I began to hear stories about the various forest spirits that lived in the woods and lure people into their nets, about the terrible monsters that come down from the old trees at nightfall and begin to hunt people. Okay, stop. My imagination was doing scary things. I closed my eyes tightly, and before I continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And make sure you have the bell clicked. Then you'll know when there's a new video coming out on the channel. So, I closed my eyes tightly and fell asleep. I was awakened by the bright sun shining through the tent. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was lying alone in the tent. Mom? Dad? I yelled, but all I got in response was the loud chirping of birds. I climbed out of the tent. No one. There were only tall trees around, surrounding the clearing on all sides. I wanted to cry. I began to shake with fear. I could not stop thinking about the terrible night, muttering. And suddenly, I felt a weight on my shoulder. Oh no! Daughter, what are you doing? Mom stood behind me and watched as I became hysterical. I'm sorry, Mom. I tried to calm down. I was just having a bad dream. Where's Dad? He's picking mushrooms. He'll be right back. Mom pointed her finger into the woods. I looked where Mom was pointing, and suddenly I saw a big dark figure. It lasted just a few seconds, but I had time to make it out. A huge, tall figure with a big round head like a dome, huge arms almost to the ground, green in color, and eyes. They were like glass. My mother noticed that I was staring intently somewhere. Daughter, what's wrong with you? I nodded my head in a negative way, trying to look deep into the forest. And then Dad came back, holding a large mushroom in his hands. And I began to listen to his story with interest, trying not to look into the woods. It turned out that he and Mom, while I was still asleep, had decided to survey the area. They walked around the clearing and found a lake nearby that wasn't on the map. I so wanted to tell them about my nighttime adventure and the gurgling, but I realized that I would be punished for leaving the tent by myself at night, so I kept quiet. The day was wonderful. We walked through the woods, gathered brushwood, made a fire, and roasted the sausages we had brought from home. Dad said we'd spend one more night here and then head back in the morning. As darkness fell, I felt uncomfortable. I decided this time to go to bed with my parents and not to wander anywhere else. When the round plate of moonlight flashed in the sky again, Dad yawned loudly and started to spread out the sleeping bags. After a few minutes, my parents were already sleeping, and I tossed from side to side. I couldn't get that strange figure figuring among the trees and the mumbling that had surrounded me the previous night out of my head. I have read many stories that when one comes into contact with wild nature, strange things happen. For example, the clean mountain air can cause hallucinations. Maybe the same thing happened to me. Suddenly a branch crunched, then another one, a little closer. I squeezed my eyes shut so tightly that they began to hurt. Don't get up, Luna. Close your eyes and ears. You're just making it up. But I could feel. There's someone here. He's right here. And he knows I know he's here. And he's waiting. Suddenly the moon shone so brightly right on our tent that I saw a shadow. A huge one. It was standing right outside the tent, not moving. I looked at my peacefully sleeping parents and realized I had to protect them. On my knees, I crawled silently to the exit of the tent, and slowly, very slowly, I got out of it. I saw the stick near the entrance. My dad had brought it from the woods. I grabbed it tightly by the edge and crawled on. Suddenly, it was very dark. It was like the moon was mocking me. 1 minute it was so bright, and then suddenly it was hidden behind the clouds. But I felt that someone was there. And then I heard an owl scream. Oh, it was awful. The moon, there it was, rolled out again, and I saw a shadow. There was that huge figure near the tent again, with a head like a dome. I jumped up, gripping the stick tightly with both hands, and rushed screaming at the shadow. And with all my might, I hit the dome as high as I could. Take that, you forest monster! There you go! And more! Take that! Take that! The shadow tried to dodge the blows. My adrenaline was going through the roof, and my head was buzzing and ringing at the same time. I heard a loud mooing. Luna! Is it me? Or does the monster know my name? I saw a flashlight near the tent, and I turned it on and pointed it at the monster. I was speechless. It was Matthew. He was sitting there in his scuba suit, trying to get the mask off his head. It was cracked. I'd hit it so hard with a stick. And Matthew's face was red and frightened. He was breathing heavily and looking at me with a mute question in his eyes. What are you doing here? I shouted. And why are you wearing that suit? We had a drill here. I'm taking a scuba diving class, remember? Matthew countered resentfully. At night? I didn't let up. And at night too. Luna, divers are trained for all sorts of diving conditions. I was embarrassed. I thought Matthew, the same Matthew we'd been friends with since kindergarten, was a forest monster. I apologized. We built a fire. I made us some tea. Matthew told me he knew about our trip to the woods. Dad had told him, so he decided to track us down. But he couldn't get out before nightfall, and that was not the kind of greeting he expected. We talked for a long time, and couldn't stop talking. Matthew had blue circles under his eyes, probably from my hitting him with a stick. And then I fell asleep, woken by my parents at the smoldering fire. Matthew was gone. My parents were so angry that I'd left the tent at night that I decided to keep quiet about my meeting with Matthew for now. And as soon as we got out of the woods and the cell service came up, which was weird, Matthew's dad called. And he said there had been an accident that night. Matthew had drowned, drowning in the lake. Can you believe it? Of course, we were all in shock. It's been 3 days. And I feel awful. So his spirit came to me at night in the woods? How could I not have realized it? Maybe I was dreaming. Or maybe I have a gift. I can see dead people. And what was all that mumbling by the lake? I closed my eyes and saw Matthew. Can you tell me if you have experienced anything like this? Can you tell me what to do?